Listeners, in a culture where wine o'clock is almost a lifestyle and socializing often revolves around a drink, sometimes even a smoke, stepping back from alcohol can feel radical. And sometimes the hardest part of slowing down isn't putting the glass down, it is sitting with what shows up when we do. And just think about this question: what would happen if that pause, that quiet space between one sip and the next, is exactly where that clarity begins? Welcome back, listeners, to this episode of the Mindful Living Podcast. I'm your host, Sana, and we are joined by someone who didn't plan to stop drinking. It just happened, one mindful choice at a time. 4 years later, that choice has reshaped not only her mental health, but also how she helps others feel included and intentional through her alcohol-free brand, To Be Honest Beverage Co. So we are going to unpack what it really means to choose mindfulness over habit, not out of perfection, but out of presence. Listeners, meet my incredible guest, Michelle Houston. Michelle, welcome to the show, and I'm really, really honored to have you here with us.
Sana, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat about this topic today and talk more about mindful, healthy living as it relates to alcohol consumption.
Absolutely, absolutely. One thing which I really, really admire, Michelle, is that, um, you know, we often talk about, like, if I talk in the brand sense or the business perspective, we all often talk about, what is the story behind your brand? What is the story behind what you are trying to do? I think this is something that, so many of us struggle with. Um, and we try to tackle everything, but somehow at the end of the day, it feels like, I'm just giving up. I'm just giving up. So I think through your story, your journey, and how exactly, To Be Honest Beverage Co., it came into its fruition, we'll definitely try to understand. And so to begin with, Michelle, let's understand the turning point. Now, in the intro, I was reading, like, quitting alcohol for you wasn't the plan, but it started as a pause for your mental health. Looking back, was there any exact moment or like a series of moments that made you realize that this pause needed to become something more?
It was definitely a series of moments over time, but there was one particular incident that really shifted things for me. I think, like anyone else who has consumed alcohol in their life, it's been seasonal. It's been relationship based, over time. So when I was younger, I started drinking at a pretty young age here in the US at around 14, which is not legal drinking age, but that's sort of what you did, and as you're going into high school and you're going to parties and hanging out with friends, and there's a certain social pressure around it. And so with that, it felt like it was just a part of your life. And as you move into college, it's a huge drinking culture here. And as you move even into the workforce, alcohol was so much a part of every part of the story, whether that was networking or celebrating, whether that's brunch or happy hour or anything else. It just was a part of everything that you did to some degree. And at a certain point, as I got older, I started experiencing series of anxiety attacks. And so I was in a really difficult place with my mental health. It felt like I was checking all the boxes when it came to exercise and sleep and meditation and eating well enough. But for whatever reason, I felt like I just wasn't in the best place mentally and emotionally. And alcohol necessarily wasn't the cause of it, but it did exacerbate the issue. So in the days to follow drinking, I was finding that I felt unmotivated. I had a sense of lethargy, and it kind of contributed to that sense of anxiety. And so there was one instance in which I was at home by myself. My husband had been working a long day, and I was curled up on the couch watching a romantic comedy at the time, and I had opened up a bottle of rosé. And just out of habit, out of practice, out of the experience that it's always around, I was drinking that bottle. And when my husband came home, I had finished the entire bottle, which, some people are like, oh, self-care, enjoy, indulge, do your thing. It just really made me realize, why am I drinking? Why am I making this choice for myself? Because at the end of the day, it all is a choice, even if it's a habit. And so that's really was the crux of my decision to pause on drinking for the time being.
Mm. And Michelle, I mean, I don't know whether it's the right question or not. Like, you mentioned about how it kind of, alcohol becomes like this um, MVP of a workplace gathering or a social gathering. And, especially for people, even for people who are, who could be dieting or be mindfully, consuming food, it can be very difficult to even be a part or get accepted into those gatherings. And especially in workplace gatherings, it feels like, if you're not a part of that gathering, then even you're not a part of the important, discussions or decisions which are happening at the workplace. You kind of feel left out. Kind of become invisible. That kind of insecurity develops within you. Has it happened to you, when internally you had recognized, you had realized that, uh, for me, it's kind of becoming a habit?
For a lot of us, I think that fear of missing out, that social acceptance, that wanting to be a part of things is such a big part of this conversation. So I think it's a great question. And at one time or another, whether you're pausing alcohol for tonight, a week, a month, indefinitely, whatever that choice is, it does almost create this divide between you and someone consuming alcohol. Now, I think there is a shift in the overarching culture. And as a society here in the US and then in other cultures and other countries across the globe, we're starting to see more of an acceptance of sobriety, sober curious movement, some of these terms that we use to refer to just kind of changing your relationship with alcohol as opposed to it being the default, which is positive. But we get a lot of customer stories, we get a lot of comments on social media about people who still experience that sense of divide in some way. And I have to say, like, a lot of people talk about not drinking and they talk about all of the positive benefits and how you're going to feel about your health and your mental clarity and your improved sleep and your improved digestion and skin health. And now you're making better choices about what you eat. And there is this domino and cascade effect into your health, your lifestyle of well-being, which is very positive and I completely promote in a big way. However, there is almost this transition period in time in which you're starting to experience, okay, I'm not drinking. What does that mean for me? How do I engage in social settings? Do I even go and attend this event because it has alcohol? How do I connect and interact with other people that are drinking? Am I judging them and are they judging me? There's a little bit of a deeper conversation that's happening, sometimes obviously not with words, with body language, with experiences, with the circumstances that you're put into and how you feel and what's going on in your head. So I do think that this is something that does need to be discussed, and know that you're not alone going through that experience if you're making that choice to not choose alcohol. And the fear of not being included can be a part of that. And so I think that's one of the reasons why our brand is important to me and purpose-driven in that way, is that what we're trying to do is change the cultural conversation to not just default to alcohol, but be inclusive in that you are still just as much included. You are the main character of your drinking story. You are at the forefront of the experience, even if you're not consuming alcohol, so that when you're in a social setting, when you're in a networking event, when you're at a special festival, when you're in all of these places that alcohol is the default, that you are enjoying it, that you are embracing it, and that you are embraced just as much as anyone else who is consuming alcohol.
That really makes sense, Michelle. Really, really makes sense. I think this is something um which is addressed To be honest, very rarely. Very, very rarely. One more question, as you described the specific moment, and that really makes me think that, especially around wine, and you mentioned around self-care, and this is something related to how exactly our, brain kind of works. So, uh, if we look around, if we also become a bit mindful and we think about, we are in a constant, going and going and doing mode. And now when we're getting some time to ourselves, it's kind of, the brain gives a signal that, if I drink this wine, I drink rosé or I drink this alcohol and, just kind of be in my space, watch something good and enjoy my wine, it's kind of a rewarding system happening inside you. So,
Mhm.
um, how do you help people who come to you and share these stories, like make them realize that this rewarding system can potentially soon become a habit? Like, how do you help them? How do you start with the process? Because it can take a lot of time. Because once again, our brain kind of it kind of tries to resist changes, sudden changes.
When I was working in health and fitness, part of my focus was behavior change and healthy habit formation. So that was kind of my niche, you could call it, or expertise. So there is a lot to the psychology and neuroscience of making a lasting change or making any change from the get-go. So you're absolutely right. There are reward centers in our brain that respond positively to a certain type of experience. Sometimes that's the thing itself, right? If you're having some type of stimulant or intoxicant, that will consciously affect your brain physically so that you have some type of experience related to that. That could be the thing itself. It could just be the environment that you're in. It could be the act of it. There are a lot of pieces at play in terms of the trigger that gives you that kind of reward sensation. And they do say that the easiest way to change a habit is to replace it. Now, I don't think that's always the case, and there's definitely a lot of situations and circumstances that can be different. But for us, when it came to consumption, that was kind of the goal, the conversation, right? Replace a beverage with a beverage. So the idea and inspiration behind the brand is having that alcohol alternative that can give you the same reward so that you experience that same trigger. So people drink for different reasons. A lot of people drink to relax or to shift from, like you were saying, your stressful day to a more relaxing time to calm down. And so if instead of alcohol, you're drinking something that has more of a functional benefit, then you're replacing that, right? Or if you're in, again, a social environment, you're going out to a bar and you're having a cocktail because you love to get drinks with your friends for happy hour, you can still have that exact same experience, but just minus the alcohol. And so there's that transition I was talking about when you stop drinking to, what do I do now? When you start to navigate that and better understand what you do in social settings, what you do by yourself, what you do at dinner time, what you do at all of the other times that you drink, you start to become more accepting of it. And I'm over 3.5 years from the last time that I drank. And the further you get away from it, the more confident you are in your choices, the more deliberate you are with what you're doing. And it just becomes less of an issue. It's not so much the main topic of conversation. Oh, why aren't you drinking? Or how come you're not having a drink tonight? Or it's okay, like I'll grab you a drink. Come on, what are you drinking? Whatever that push, that pressure is. Or if you're just say solo and you're ending a stressful workday and you're just thinking, oh, I could just really use that glass of wine. The further you get away from those things, the more that you realize you have a better, improved alternative for that type of experience that gives you a more rewarding sense of self, a more rewarding response in your brain. And so when you're not experiencing the hangover, the ill effects, you're not having any intoxication. For me, alcohol was numbing and avoiding. And so when you start to kind of get rid of those things and replace them with the positive things, the behavior, the change becomes so much more integrated into your personal identity that you feel confident, comfortable, and satisfied with those choices. And so you want to make more of them. So it's a really great domino effect into other aspects of your life. But ultimately, making the change and the behavior shift can be difficult at first. Once you find the alternatives that work for you, you actually start to get more and more away from even the alternatives because you're almost starting to dwindle the need for it. And with something like alcohol, which is addictive, you could have an addictive response to it even if you don't have an alcohol addiction. So it can feel to you like you need to have that glass of wine, but you really don't. And so once you get further and further away from that and you start to break that chain, break that habit, then you open up yourself to the possibility that I don't even need an alternative now. I don't need anything, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And congratulations, Michelle. 5 years. That is a feat. Congrats for that. That is really, really inspiring. And also I think it really, really makes sense. And the good thing is that, you are actually integrating uh, science into this as well, because many a times the perception is more built around, what kind of societal norms or ideas are, or perception is there around alcohol and drinking, or in fact also sobriety. And another part, and this is specific to your brand, Michelle, like to be honest, centers around intention and inclusion, creating experiences that don't rely on alcohol to feel meaningful. I mean, as you beautifully explained. What does community look like for you now, 4 years later, through this new lens of mindful living?
Well, thank you, firstly. It's definitely, I think, a choice that I didn't realize would affect so many parts of my life. Alcohol consumption is ultimately for you, and you're the only one who's kind of consuming and having that experience, whether that's internal or external of your circumstances. But you actually don't realize the domino effect that it has on your partner or spouse, your family members, your children, your professional relationships, your friendships, how you choose to engage with your time. And so, as you were saying, over time, that shift in community looks different. It changes, the things that you're choosing to do. Whereas, we used to, my alcohol or my husband and partner has been in alcohol for over a decade, which is he's the production, design, and manufacturing behind our product. But he's made alcohol and been in that industry for a very long time. And so when your activities look like beer festivals and wine tastings and beer classes and cider events and cider pairings with food, and you realize you have to make some type of shift in how you're engaging with the world and the choices that you're making. And then you start to do different things. Maybe the center and the focus of the time you're getting together with your friends is games as opposed to alcohol. Maybe what you do with your time is more related to physical activity. My husband drinks so much less than he used to. He maybe drinks like once or twice a week now, but everything he consumes at home is pretty much non-alcoholic. And he joined an outrigger canoe paddling group. So multiple times a week, he goes out on the water and he paddles in long distance. I am big into fitness. There are a few things on that I'm trying to check off. I picked up archery recently, not as like a long-term thing, but to take some classes and to try dance classes, playing pickleball, getting together with people for ultimate frisbee, going to the beach. You start to kind of see things differently. And when you're not automatically thinking about drinking, which before was like, okay, we're going to watch football and drink beer. And that was like the activity. We're going to go to this event specifically because they're serving alcohol. You just start to look for other opportunities. And especially if you're based in a city, we're kind of in a smaller town, a little bit more of a rural area. So our activities look a little bit more outdoors. But there are a lot of other activities that are happening in cities that I feel like expose you to games or interactive art or laser tag or adult trampoline spaces or golfing. We're in kind of a really neat time and space where we can build relationships and build community through run clubs. Or there's a great program called Coffee and Chill where they get together, they do ice baths and drink coffee in the morning. There are these festivals and like raves that are happening in the daytime with zero alcohol. So we're looking at this really, really great time, I think, in history to be alive if alcohol consumption isn't your number one go-to, because we're starting to create other opportunities for that community. And there's, everyone, we try to take the approach as much as possible that we're not shaming alcohol. There's nothing you should feel guilty about or embarrassed about for consuming. And that's why our goal is inclusivity as opposed to just going to completely sober or non-alcoholic. There can be really negative effects in the world because of alcohol, right? It's a toxin, it's a poison. Like, there are very, very clear data, science, numbers, all related to what it does to your body internally. The effects of alcohol in terms of driving and the amount of deaths or injuries that are related to alcohol-related incidences are very high. There are a lot of those things. We try not to center around that as much as what are the positive things that you can choose outside of alcohol as a different choice and as a different opportunity. But ultimately, we're in a beautiful time and space where people get to be more intentional, more mindful, build deeper connections, grow relationships that are not solely centered around numbing, avoidance, or even intoxication, which that's the goal of alcohol. Flavor aside, because people say, oh, I like the flavor of alcohol, which I respect. But at the same time, it's an intoxicant. The goal of alcohol is to get you drunk, tipsy, buzzed. So if you look at flavor, you can find great flavor in other places. And actually, alcohol and ethanol can kill or dampen, I'll say, the palate of experience of flavor. So when you remove alcohol, you're actually more adept at tasting things more deeply and more effectively. So in any case, that was a little bit of a tangent, but ultimately, you start thinking of things differently. You start thinking of engaging with people differently, and you almost step into a certain sense of like confidence. If you're not worried about intoxication, if you're not worried about drinking, if you're not thinking about that, if you're not needing it as quote unquote a social lubricant or your liquid courage, you start to show up differently too. And so the way that you represent yourself in social environments and in community changes, and the way that people perceive you changes. And so that's a big shift that I see globally, nationally, and then of course that I've seen in my own personal life as well, transitioning away from alcohol.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. That is really, really, once again, very inspiring. And of course, Michelle, if listeners, they would like to explore more about, to be honest, Beverage, and they would also like to connect with you, what would be the best medium?
You can find us online, social channels, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, among others. To be honest, Bev, TOBE, honest, and Bev is in beverage. And we have the same for our website. So it's tobehonestbev.com. You can order online, and we ship anywhere within the US at this time. And then we're also available in a select nonprofit or non-alcoholic, rather, bottle shops and bars across the nation. So we don't have any major grocery or retailers, but you can find us online and ask any questions you might have via DM and Instagram following up this conversation.
Super. So listeners, I'll have all the links in the show notes. So I encourage all of you to check out tobehonestbev.com. I think it is such such a beautiful reflection that mindfulness isn't becoming someone new, but it's a homecoming to who we already are without the noise. And that is evident from Michelle's journey and the story behind, to be honest, Bev. So, Michelle, thank you so much for bringing honesty, nuance, and compassion to this space.
Sana, thank you so much for having me.
Of course, of course. And to all the listeners, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Mindful Living. Until next time, stay grounded, stay curious, and stay kind to yourself. This is your host, Sana, signing off. Thank you.